this video, we're going to talk about adapting code for your own purposes. As you continue coding, you're going to start noticing things on people's websites that you're going to want to try out yourself. In the first adapting code video, we actually talked about the sticky property of using a sticky nav bar, and we practiced adapting that code. So in this one, I'm going to carry on with that a little bit and show you how to combine the idea of troubleshooting and adapting code in this video. Our sticky nav bar works in the sense that it definitely sticks, and when you're scrolling around, that's great. But I don't know if you noticed, but when you jump to the links, to the bookmarks, you actually have a little bit of an issue because it's not jumping quite to the right place, right? So it is jumping to the right place, but the sticky nav bar is actually covering up the heading of the section. See what I'm saying? So you're losing that important themes, you're losing the background title because it's underneath the sticky nav bar. So I don't think we want to throw in the towel on the sticky nav bar, but we do want to figure out how to offset the height of it so that we're not losing our bookmarks. All right, so what do? One thing that you can do is find a website that's using that functionality and where it's working the way you would want it to work, and then take a look at their code. So that's one thing we can do. We looked at that in the last adapting code video from the last class, so I want to use a slightly different method here. So the other thing you can do is Google. There are just tons of coding discussion boards online, and people are very willing to share code solutions with other people. It's actually a very friendly community, and people are very willing to share. So one of the boards that I particularly like is Stack Overflow. And so this is where I went and I Googled sticky nav bookmark link offset. So I tried to describe the problem as much as I could. And I find that there is a topic for offsetting an HTML anchor to adjust for a fixed header. And that's exactly what we're thinking about. Now, not all of the responses are equal, right? You want to try them out. So for example, this one actually has some solutions that use JavaScript. And if we don't know how you use JavaScript, maybe that's not going to be the solution that we want to try. So here's another one, and there seems to be some good reaction to this one. It's using a sort of old-fashioned protocol, but we can ignore that. We can compensate for that. What we care about is the suggestion here in terms of using an offset in the landing place. Let's try this one. So let's just remind ourselves what our own page is doing. So we have our bookmarks, they're linked here in the nav, and then we have our landing places here, things like the article ID, right? That's where it's landing. And then this is the first line that's actually visible on the page. Because remember, the article is just that invisible structural element, and then we actually have our H2 would be the first thing visible to the user on the page. So if we're going to adapt this solution, we want to create a CSS style that we can apply where we want our bookmarks to land that's going to include this offset. So they've done something here in their coding that really you should not do. So this is a way of inline applying CSS style. We don't want to do that, right? Remember, we want to use our external CSS style sheet to do this. So we can definitely do what's being suggested here, but do it in our CSS style. But this is where that idea of adapting comes through. Let's remember, so we want nav is the thing that we're worried about, and we want to create an offset for our bookmarks. So what this person is suggesting is creating a style that would apply at the point where we're landing our bookmark. So let's create a custom class. We're going to call it offset. And then we're going to put in these suggestions that they have here. Okay, so that's fine. So now we've got our class, and now we want to make sure we're applying it in the right spot. And that would be at the point on the page where our content would first be visible that we're trying to jump to. So in our case, if we go back to our HTML code, this is the point we're going to jump to, but remember, this is invisible to the user. The H2 is the first thing that they're going to see. Maybe we should apply the offset here with our H2, because that would be the first visible element for the user. Okay, so we're going to try that, and then we're going to jump back to our page. We want to reload this. We also want to reload our CSS just to be on the safe side. And now let's try. So remember, I put that offset code just right here, right in my, right before my H2. So let's see. Okay, that's better, right? We're starting to see the background a little bit, but it looks like we need to offset it actually a little bit more. And if you notice what we're doing here, it's adding padding and then subtracting the margin, the top margin. So it's sort of like creating more space, but then compensating for that with the margin property. And that's what's creating the offset. Okay, so background, that seems good. Important themes, well, it's still hard to tell because I think we're at the bottom of the page. So let's zoom that out a little bit more. Okay, yes, that seems to be working. Okay, so that offset is working. Now notice that did cause another problem. Our top link, you can see just the teeny tiny bit of it. Our top link seems to have disappeared. So by messing around with the top margin of the page, we've actually pushed our top link too far down. And because it is a fixed link, it has basically been pushed off the page. So that's not good. Here where we have our margin bottom, we now need to add some additional pixels to that to compensate for our offset of 50 here. So we're going to have to actually make this, let's do 60. That should, if we're doing our math right, that should work. Okay, there we go. And actually that even may be more offsetting than we need. So we can maybe make that just 50. Yeah, okay, that's better. That's a good lesson too. When you're making changes, sometimes it's going to have other effects that you're not expecting. Make sure that you're really evaluating your whole page and that things are functioning the way you want them to function. So now in this case, we should be, and again, that's just because it's the bottom of the page, but we now can jump and we actually can see our tags. And when we jump to the top, we still can see the top link in order to be able to do that. So that just gives you a sense of adapting code, using a message board, something like that to find a coding solution. And if that one didn't work, there are lots of other solutions on there that we could test out and try. But keep in mind, you need to really think through what the person is suggesting for the code and then think about how that applies to your page and then make those modifications. So for example, we didn't just straight apply it as it was written in the solution. We adapted it to put it in our CSS style sheet so that it can apply to all of our links on our pages. So, and in this case, actually, for example, we're only using H2s as the first element in an article, and we're only jumping to those H2s. And that is, in fact, what we're doing here. We wouldn't even necessarily need the custom class. We actually could just apply this to our H2 tag. So in that case, we don't even need to go through the page and add a custom class in our H2s. We just can apply it directly to the H2 tag itself, because that's the only time that we're using that tag is at the beginning of an article, which is a place that we're trying to jump with our bookmark. Just thinking through some of those things can make your life easier as a coder. And if you're really consistent with that in the way that I only need to do this, I don't need to do any additional coding in my HTML page. I can really just work in CSS. Those are the sorts of things you want to think through as you're adapting code. You always want to try to be as efficient as possible, make things as easy for yourself as possible. Do as little additional coding in the HTML as you need to beyond the structure of the page. Those are some of the principles you want to keep in mind. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how to use other people's code solutions to adapt them to your page and try to solve problems that you're working on for yourself.